Her son and daughter-in-law unplugged her heater during a record-breaking snowstorm. Nora Ellison, a 72-year-old widow and former city accountant, didn't protest. Upstairs, Eli and Tiffany drank wine while she watched her breath frost the air. By spring, their names were erased from her will, her deed, and her accounts. She'd once raised a son. Now she was raising consequences. They took her warmth. She took back everything else. Wait. Before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The cold woke her before the silence did. Nora blinked up at the cracked ceiling, breath puffing out like a ghost. Her legs were tucked beneath two quilts, her wool socks layered over another pair. Still, a sharp bite clung to the air, a cold that didn't just settle in her bones, but pressed against her skin like a threat. She reached for the space heater beside her recliner. No orange glow, no hum, just dark. She pressed the button again. Nothing. A glance at the window showed a thick curtain of snow falling steadily, heavier than the night before. Forecasts had warned about record lows, wind chill dropping below zero. Buffalo winters didn't play fair. She wrapped a third shawl around her shoulders and reached for her phone. Eli picked up on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Mom? Everything okay?" "My heater's off," Nora said quietly. "I think something tripped." Pause. Then, "Oh, Tiffany unplugged it. Said it was sucking too much power. We didn't think you'd still be up." "You didn't think I'd need heat?" Another pause. "She figured you had plenty of blankets down there. You're layered up, right?" The line went quiet. She heard muffled laughter in the background. A television. The clink of a wine glass. She said that. "Yeah, she's just trying to save energy with the storm and all. It's tight for everyone, you know." Tight. The word stuck in Nora's throat. Tight was Tiffany's new excuse for every passive insult. The thermostat locked, the empty pantry shelf she used, the door that no longer shut without a key. "I'll be fine," Nora said, though her voice betrayed her. She hung up. The in-law suite, a converted lower level that Nora herself had paid to renovate 10 years earlier, was now a dim cocoon of ice. Even the tile floor, once warm with radiant heat, felt dead beneath her slippers. She shuffled to the kitchenette, boiled water with shaking hands, and poured it into a ceramic mug, pressing it to her chest like a heating stone. Outside, the snow piled higher against the glass. Inside, laughter rose again from upstairs. Footsteps padded down the staircase. A gentle knock. "Grandma." It was Miles in fleece pajamas and a sheepish look on his face. He held a warm rice pack, freshly microwaved, and handed it to her without saying much. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know she unplugged it." Nora placed a hand on his arm, cool skin against warm fabric. "Not your fault, sweetheart." He left a folded paper tucked into her tea tin. After he'd crept back upstairs, she opened it, in his careful blocky handwriting. "Sorry, Grandma. I don't think it's right. Love, Miles." That did more to warm her than the tea. Still, the cold seeped in like guilt. Her late husband Richard would have raised hell by now. But Nora had learned to endure in silence, the widow's art of becoming smaller, quieter, easier. She thought she'd find peace here after Richard's passing. Instead, she became a tenant in her own investment. Around midnight, after watching her breath linger in the air one too many times, she grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and crouched beside the wall outlet where the space heater had been plugged in. The cord was there, yanked out, not gently unplugged. She lifted it into the light. The plug's rubber casing was split at the base, wires slightly exposed, as if someone had pulled it forcefully and twisted it. Not a mistake. Not some overloaded fuse. She ran a finger over the frayed cord. This wasn't just careless. It was calculated. From upstairs, Tiffany's laugh rang out like glass breaking in a distant room. Nora stared at the ruined cord in her hand, the cold radiating off the floor like quiet betrayal. No more assumptions, no more giving them the benefit of the doubt. As the heater sat dead beside her, she felt something else warming. Not her toes, not her skin, but something deeper. Resolve. The heater cord still sat on the table like a body with no pulse. Nora didn't touch it again. She didn't need to. Upstairs, the floor creaked, faint footsteps, muffled voices, the kind of sounds you learn to interpret when you're made invisible in your own home. Nora picked up her phone. The last thing she'd recorded was a grocery list, but that night, something had made her hit voice memos and set the phone on the end table facing upward. She tapped play. The clip began with casual background noise, wine glasses clinking, a pop from the TV. Then Tiffany's voice cut through high and sharp, like cold wind slapping glass. "She's basically furniture now," Tiffany said, followed by a nasal laugh. "Takes up space, makes creaky noises, doesn't contribute much." Eli's voice responded, low, worn, "Just hang tight till spring. Then she can go." A long pause, some shuffling. Then Tiffany again. "Honestly, but I don't know why we thought this would be temporary. She's never gonna leave unless we push her to." Nora didn't flinch, didn't cry. Instead, she hit save, labeled it living room, January 4th, and uploaded it to her cloud storage, a secure folder. Double verification. Her fingers moved calmly, deliberately, like a woman folding linens after a funeral. The silence afterward was louder than the clip. Outside, the wind screamed against the old windows. The snow had turned to hard ice pellets, smacking the glass with rhythmic fury. A winter prison. Then came the knock. Carol didn't wait to be invited in. She never did. She pushed through the back door wrapped in a heavy wool coat, a thermos under one arm, her salt and pepper hair sticking out from her knit hat. "Oh, Nora," she muttered, scanning the dimly lit room. "Feels like a meat locker down here." "I thought so too," Nora said, her voice barely above the hum of her breath. Carol set the thermos down on the counter and unscrewed the lid. Steam curled up like breath from a running horse. "Chicken soup, thick with carrots and rice. Drink this, your hands are shaking." Nora accepted the mug but didn't lift it. Her fingers trembled against the ceramic, not just from the cold, from recognition. "How fast do you think a heater dies?" she asked quietly. Carol turned, brows furrowed. "Faster than trust." They locked eyes. No more needed to be said. Nora took a sip, then reached for a battered notebook on the counter. She flipped it open, revealing pages already marked in tidy handwriting. Dates, quotes, receipts, power bills, medical copays, furnace maintenance records. Even the cost of the rice pack Miles had microwaved. Carol leaned over, lips pursed. "What are you doing?" "Building a map," Nora said. "In case someone tries to act like this all just happened." There was no bitterness in her tone, no fire, just a still, quiet certainty, the kind that grows under snow for months before blooming in spring. Miles had always liked puzzles. She wondered if he'd understand someday how everything fit together. "I've got more upstairs," Carol offered. "Notarizing equipment. Envelopes. You say the word." Nora didn't respond right away. She placed the mug down, went to her desk drawer, and pulled out a thick manila folder with old estate paperwork. Her late husband's signature still lingered in blue ink on the cover page. "I think it's time," she said. Carol raised an eyebrow. "Time for what?" Nora's lips tightened. She reached for her phone again and scrolled through her contacts, found James Petrus, attorney. Tapped the message box. Urgent change of beneficiaries. Carol watched her with something close to admiration, but not without sadness. "You sure?" Nora didn't look up. "I was sure the night the heater died." The frost on the window wasn't just cold, it was deliberate. Nora sat alone in the waiting room of James Petrus's law office, gloved hands curled around a folder thick with life's paperwork. Outside, snowflakes swirled in chaotic spirals, coating the historic Buffalo streets in dense white. She watched a mother pull her toddler along a sidewalk, their breath mingling in the air like steam. Inside, the receptionist gave her a quick nod. "He'll see you now." Nora stood, each movement calculated, deliberate. The folder felt heavier now, as if it knew what it carried wasn't just documents, but decisions that couldn't be undone. James's office was warm, too warm. A gas fireplace flickered behind his desk, casting golden light onto his face. He didn't rise when she entered. He just looked up over his reading glasses and gave her a quiet nod. "Nora," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Long time." "Too long," she replied. "But I'm here now." He studied her expression. "You said it was urgent." She opened the folder with the precision of a woman slicing through old curtains. Inside, a will, an outdated estate plan, a list of assets, notes in her handwriting. She slid it across the desk. "I want Eli and Tiffany removed," she said. No hesitation. "Completely. I'm done writing in pencil." James leaned forward, flipping through the pages, the legal rhythm of his fingers clicking as he read. "You sure you want this to stick? I'm 72, not 17. This isn't emotion, it's math. And Miles?" She reached into her coat pocket and produced a sealed envelope. Inside, her intentions for a partial asset transfer, a long-term education fund, and one condition that it not be told to him yet. "He's 13. I'm not turning him into a bargaining chip, but I'll protect what's his." James raised a brow. "You've got more backbone than half the estate clients I see these days." "I had to grow it," she replied, eyes steady, piece by piece. He turned back to the documents. "We can make the trust irrevocable. That means they can't contest or reverse it after your passing. No challenges, no revisions. Make it very irrevocable," she said. He smiled at the phrasing but didn't question it. "And I want a separate emergency living trust. For me. In case they try anything manipulative. Financial moves, or physical ones," she said plainly. James paused. "You think they'd go that far?" She looked past him, toward the frost-laced window. "They already did." An hour later, after the legal signatures were inked, notarized, and filed, Nora stepped back into the bitter cold with a copy of her future in her coat pocket. She took the long way home, walking slowly past the old stone library and the snow-choked iron fences that lined her neighborhood. Ice crackled beneath her boots, wind bit at her cheeks. But the chill no longer felt invasive. It felt clean. When she reached the house, she could already hear Tiffany's voice echoing through the windows. Nora stayed by the side walkway, near the hedges, where her in-law suite's path curved away from the front door. She looked up. Tiffany was decorating the front room, setting up gold-trimmed place settings, pouring wine into stemless glasses. A small gathering. Not a word to Nora. No knock, no invite. Just party lights reflecting off the glass like distant stars. Nora stood still, the wind tossing her scarf like a banner. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. She was tracking. Every slight, every omission, it was currency now. Inside, Tiffany leaned toward one of her guests, laughing with that same brittle tone Nora had recorded. "Don't worry," Tiffany said, loud enough for the sound to leak through the floor vent and down to Nora's space below. "She'll be gone by spring. That's the plan." Nora stepped back from the window, her breath forming a single silent cloud. If spring was the deadline, then winter would be her weapon. The receipts didn't start as armor. They started as proof she wasn't crazy. Nora sat at the fold-out table in her suite, the surface covered with paper like a blizzard had landed indoors. Each piece of documentation, utility bills, medical summaries, repair invoices, was stacked into neat columns. The thermostat read 59 degrees Fahrenheit, but her blood ran warmer with every page she sorted. She held up last month's heating bill. Her section of the house was supposed to be on a shared system, but the usage had mysteriously dipped, right around the time her space turned to ice. Another folder. This one contained notes from her pediatrist, who'd warned that circulation issues in the elderly can escalate dangerously in cold conditions. Tiffany had mocked the compression socks. Now the sock invoice sat stapled to a doctor's recommendation. Each page was dated, copied, and logged. She reached for her old maroon notebook, the one she used during tax seasons when she still worked for the city. She opened to a fresh page and titled it in capital letters, "I incidents, undocumented neglect." Beneath it, she began to write. January 3rd, heater unplugged during record low storm. No prior notice. Toe discoloration noted next morning. No apology. No reconnection attempt. Each word was steady. Each line was a quiet scream no one had bothered to hear. The back door creaked open without a knock. "I brought my notary kit," Carol announced, setting down a leather folder and shaking off her coat. "And some oatmeal cookies that probably taste like guilt." Nora gave her a tired smile. "As long as they're certified." Carol raised an eyebrow and scanned the sea of documents. "What is all this?" "Insurance. In case the narrative flips," Nora said, tapping the notebook. "And a map of where not to bury your trust." Carol let out a low whistle. "This isn't just defensive. This is war prep. Not war, just groundwork." As Carol reviewed the pages, stamping and initialing where needed, footsteps padded quietly down the staircase. "Grandma." Miles stood in the doorway, hesitant. He looked from the piles of paper to Carol to the notary stamp, and then back to Nora. "Is this homework?" "In a way," she said, softening. "You want to help?" He nodded. She slid a stack of documents toward him and handed him a stack of file tabs. "Alphabetize these by vendor name. Red tab for utility, blue for medical, yellow for just in case." He got to work without asking why. His small hands moved with surprising precision. He didn't talk much, just focused, quietly efficient, like he sensed the gravity of what he was touching. Nora watched him, then glanced at Carol. "One day," she said softly, "this will all make sense to him." Carol nodded. "Let's hope it doesn't have to." After an hour, Miles stood and stretched. He didn't say anything, just walked over and wrapped his arms around Nora's shoulders. No explanation, no announcement, just warmth, unprompted, and sincere. She didn't ask what he understood. Children like Miles didn't need details to know when something was wrong. He left soon after, slipping quietly back upstairs. Nora gathered the newly organized folders, placed them in a fireproof box beneath her desk, and locked it with a key that would never leave her pocket. She was pouring tea when her phone buzzed. New email from Peterson and White Elder Services. Subject: Request for Power of Attorney Authorization, submitted by Tiffany Ellison. Nora stared at the screen. Her breath caught. Her hands tightened around the mug's handle. She hadn't signed any power of attorney. She hadn't authorized anyone, especially not her. Nora didn't knock this time. She pushed open James Petrus's office door with the same force she used to close her marriage's final mortgage payment. "Firm, final, undeniable. I need everything revoked," she said, even before the door clicked shut behind her. James looked up from his desk, blinked once behind his glasses, then rose to his feet. "Good morning to you too." She placed the email printout on his desk like it was a smoking gun. Request for Power of Attorney Authorization, submitted by Tiffany Ellison, filed, time-stamped, without consent. "They didn't just cross a line," Nora said, voice low and steady. "They packed a lunch and planned to live there." James scanned the document, his jaw tightened. "You never signed anything giving her this." "Not a word," she replied. "She's gambling on exhaustion and silence. Two things I'm fresh out of." Without needing more, James moved swiftly. His fingers flew over the keyboard, his tone shifting from casual to legal precision. "Will revoke all prior power of attorney designations. Permanent, retroactive if possible." And, he looked up. "You want a cease directive, don't you? I want her frozen out of every account like she froze me out of my home." Within an hour, it was done. James drafted and filed an official cease and desist letter, electronically delivered to Tiffany and carbon copied to Eli, Peterson and White, and the State Elder Protection Agency. The language was airtight. Any attempt to access Nora's medical, financial, or legal records without express, notarized consent would result in formal legal action. "Any other areas of concern?" James asked. Nora's reply was ice-edged. "All of them." By the time she stepped back into the cold, her breath came easier. There were still tremors in her hands, but they came from adrenaline now, not weakness. The sky was heavy with snow again. Nora didn't go home immediately. She stopped by Carol's instead. Inside, Carol was elbow deep in bread dough, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. "You look like someone who just stabbed someone with a fountain pen," she said, reading Nora's face. "I just amputated 2 limbs from my legal life. About damn time." Carol dusted her hands on a towel. Locks. They walked across the street together, wind slapping their cheeks, boots crunching through slush. Carol pulled out a ring of keys and got to work at Nora's upstairs entrance, the interior door that connected her suite to the main house. "You sure?" Carol asked. "Screwdriver already twisting. If they can't knock, they don't belong in." The deadbolt clicked into place like a vault ceiling shut. Later that evening, Nora sat at her desk with a cup of hot lemon water, her eyes scanning the glow of her laptop. Her online banking dashboard was open. She had changed the password twice since that morning. Then the alert came. Unrecognized login attempt, blocked, location. Buffalo, New York time. 7:12 p.m. device, MacBook Pro. She didn't own a MacBook. But Tiffany did. Her hands clenched the edge of the desk. She clicked into the security logs. What she saw next made her stomach drop. This wasn't the first attempt. There had been 3 others, spaced out over the past 3 months. One in late November, another just after Christmas. Well before the heater incident, the storm wasn't the beginning. It was the cover story. They hadn't just tried to take her warmth. They'd been circling her assets for weeks. Nora stared at the banking dashboard, finger hovering over the button that read, "Close account." The cursor blinked like a dare. She clicked it. The screen confirmed the transfer. Her city pension, the reliable check she'd lived on for almost 2 decades, was now routed to a newly opened account at Lake Erie Federal Credit Union, a place neither Eli nor Tiffany had ever stepped foot in. Security questions, fresh passwords, 2-step authentication. She even chose a new beneficiary, Miles Ellison, pending age 18 approval. The message popped up on her phone before she'd even left the branch. "Eli, can we talk? Let's reset." She stared at the message. Her gloved thumb hovered, then typed, "You already reset me," to invisible. She didn't wait for a reply. Next stop was the utility office. The clerk at the counter looked half asleep until Nora placed her folder down with a soft thump. "I'd like to open a new account," she said. "Private meter, only for the in-law suite. I have the blueprints." The woman raised an eyebrow but nodded. "We'll get someone out for the inspection." Nora didn't blink. "They'll want to wear thick socks." By evening the sky had dropped into that flat late winter gray, more ash than silver. Carol showed up in a hoodie that said "Back off." "I'm retired," and carried a space heater under one arm and a breaker kit under the other. "Let's make you unplug proof," she said. In the crawl space under Nora's unit, they worked like wartime electricians. Nora held the flashlight. Carol connected the heater to a new breaker box that she routed into the side wall. The cord snaked behind a cabinet, fully hidden. "This'll stay warm no matter what power they kill upstairs," Carol said. "Feels like hiding cash in the walls." Nora muttered, "Good. Because you're dealing with thieves." Later that night, a folded piece of paper slipped under her door. It was an invitation. A party, upstairs. The same friend group Tiffany always catered to. Women who wore matching wine glasses and posted inspirational quotes about boundaries while controlling every room they entered. Nora scanned the card. No RSVP request. No mention of her. Not even a passive downstairs welcome. Invisible again. She poured herself a scotch. The bottle still hidden behind the linen shelf where Richard once stashed emergency bourbon for tax season. The heat from her new unit began to hum, low and comforting. She was reaching for the envelope that had held the party invite when she noticed something else inside the drawer. Older paper, thick and cream-colored, with a red ribbon curled in its crease. She unfolded it slowly. The deed, the full deed. She'd forgotten she had the original tucked away. Not the copy in the trust file James kept, but the deed, signed and sealed. The house was in her name. Sole owner, no co-owners, no transfers, not even Eli listed as contingent. Her breath caught. For all the noise, all the assumptions, All the decorating and passive slights and attempts at legal takeover, they hadn't even checked. They didn't own a single brick. She held the paper against the light, tracing her name on the line with her thumb. Nora Ellison, owner. The last thing Nora heard before cutting the internet was Tiffany's voice, shrill and smug, echoing through the floor vents. And I told her, it's not like she even uses it. Why pay for what she doesn't need? Nora didn't flinch. She had the router cradled in one hand, its blinking green lights, like a heartbeat about to flatline. She unplugged the modem first, then the power strip. The lights died without ceremony. The room fell silent, not peaceful silence, alert silence. She picked up her phone, tapped the Spectrum app, and confirmed the cancellation. Primary account holder, Nora Ellison. Final payment, 0 balance. Automatic renewal, off F. She waited. The first scream came less than a minute later. Woof, wait. Are you serious? The stream just, did someone unplug something? Then came the footsteps. Stomping, stiletto fast and hard against the wood. Tiffany burst through the internal door connecting to the staircase, only to find it locked. Nora opened the deadbolt, just long enough to greet her, calm and collected, holding her own steaming cup of tea. What the hell did you do? Tiffany snapped, holding up her phone like it was a broken weapon. The Wi-Fi's out. None of our devices work. Miles's homework was uploading. Nora took a sip. Then maybe he'll learn how to use a library. That's not funny. Neither was having my heater pulled during a blizzard. Ask me again about funny. Eli appeared behind Tiffany, wearing a hoodie and concerned husband face. Mom, he said, trying to lower the volume. Can we just, what's going on? What's going on? Nora said, handing him a crisp envelope from the entry table. Is that you're 3 months behind on what we agreed would be temporary contributions. Since you all insisted on cohabiting this house, I've itemized what that's looked like on paper. He opened the envelope. His face slackened. Rent, backdated. Reasonable rates. Electric split by square footage. Water too. Tiffany rolled her eyes. You're seriously charging us to live here? Nora took a slow step forward. I'm not charging you. I'm informing you. Rent is due in 30 days, or you make other arrangements. Eli tried to laugh it off. Mom, come on. We're family. This is just getting out of hand. You didn't think it was out of hand when she filed for power of attorney behind my back. The silence dropped like a stone. Eli glanced sideways at Tiffany, who immediately turned her glare toward the ceiling. You're overreacting, Tiffany muttered. It was just a placeholder in case something happened to you. You mean like hypothermia? Nora said. Because I've got those records too. Before either of them could form a retort, Carol appeared in the hallway behind Nora, arms crossed, leaning casually against the doorframe. I brought brownies, she said flatly. But I can always eat them myself if this escalates. Tiffany spun. Who are you? Neighborhood Watch, Carol said. Unofficially, legally, Nora's witness. Eli took a deep breath, rubbing his temples. Maybe we should just move out. Nora looked past him toward the stairwell. You're not getting the choice this time. Later that night, Nora sat at her desk, finalizing the paperwork she'd prepped for days. The eviction notice was clean, legal and firm. 30 days, delivered by certified mail and taped to their door by morning. Her phone buzzed, a number she knew by heart. James Petrus, she answered. Nora, he said, we're nearly there. Just one last form to sign, to finalize the property trust transfer. She smiled without smiling. Send it over. I'll bring my own pen. The ink was barely dry on the final signature when Nora felt the shift, subtle but seismic. James handed her the stamped form across his mahogany desk. It's official. The house is no longer just property. It's a protected asset, held in an irrevocable trust under your control. Nora held the document like it was a deed to her own spine. And if they try to fight it, they won't win. You've locked the doors financially, legally, and permanently. She nodded. Time to change the locks on memory too. Before leaving, she slid another folder across the desk. Inside, her updated executor instructions. Carol's the backup if anything happens. No delays. No appeals. James raised a brow. You trust her that much? I trust her with heat. That's more than I can say for anyone upstairs. Back home, the wind clawed at the eaves like it wanted in. Nora welcomed the sound now. The storm was hers. Later that afternoon, Miles knocked gently on her sweet door. He wasn't bundled up for play this time. Just jeans, a hoodie and that cautious look he always wore when things upstairs got loud. Can I hang out down here? He asked, already stepping inside. Of course, she said, gesturing to the reading chair by the fireplace. He sat quietly while she poured them both hot cider. They didn't talk about the eviction notice, or the shouting from earlier, or the doors slamming so hard that even the windows had trembled. Instead, Nora reached into her desk and pulled out a small envelope sealed in wax. This is for you, she said, handing it to him gently. Not now, not soon, but someday. Miles stared at it. What is it? A key, she said, to something I hope you'll understand when you need to. He nodded slowly and slipped the envelope into his jacket. Then he hugged her, quick, tight, like he was trying to anchor himself to her warmth before going back upstairs. When the door closed behind him, Nora turned to her printer. She pulled up Tiffany's latest social media posts, each one a veiled jab, wrapped in inspirational tone and fake compassion. Some people can't handle sharing. Entitlement disguised as generosity. Boundaries are for the brave. Nora printed each post, time-stamped and clipped them to her logbook. Words like those were paper-thin online, but in courtrooms they gained weight. That night, something else happened. The heat upstairs sputtered. Not her unit. Hers hummed steadily behind her cabinet wall, but the main house. Nora heard the vent above her go quiet. Then a low electronic beep. She walked upstairs with deliberate steps, stopping at the breaker panel in the hallway. She stared at the labeled circuits, eyes landing on main HVAC. She flipped it to OFF. A full second of silence. Then shouting. Eli's voice. What happened now? Tiffany's screech. It's freezing. Did she do this? Downstairs, Nora lit her fireplace and poured herself another drink. Her name was on every utility now, including the breaker box. The power hadn't gone out. She'd turned it off. Through the frosted kitchen window, she saw movement, suitcases lined by the front door, hastily packed bags, dropped near the stairwell. Tiffany pacing in her heeled boots, checking her phone with frantic fingers. Eli running his hand through his hair. Then, finally, they stepped outside to the driveway. Nora watched from behind the curtain. Eli turned toward the house. Just once. His voice cut through the night. Are you really doing this? Nora didn't answer. She just watched the frost creep back onto the glass. The driveway filled with movement before dawn broke. Suitcases slammed into the back of Eli's SUV. The air was sharp, filled with the metallic scent of frozen metal and old resentment. Tiffany paced in tight circles near the porch, coat open despite the cold, yelling into her phone. Eli moved stiffly, not looking toward the lower-level windows, not looking at Nora. She didn't move from the chair beside her fireplace. Steam curled off her tea, like smoke off a pistol. From where she sat, she could see the edge of the porch. The same porch where Eli used to jump rope barefoot, where Richard once carried him inside after a bike crash. Now, he stood beside a car he didn't pay for, next to a woman who'd tried to file Nora out of her own life. The doorbell rang. Twice. She didn't move. Then it stopped. A shadow moved past the frosted glass. A pause. Something slid through the mail slot. Nora rose slowly and crossed the room. Her knees ached today, but her spine, never straighter. She bent down and picked up the paper. A folded square, ink smudged slightly from someone's thumb. She opened it. Love you. Scrawled in Miles's familiar handwriting. No signature, no date, just that. Nora walked to the side table where she kept the things that mattered. She opened a small velvet pouch. Inside was a silver pendant, an oval charm with an engraving so faded it could barely be read. All things in time. It was the one she wore the day Miles was born. He used to tug on it with his baby fists while napping against her chest. She hadn't worn it in years. She slipped it into a smaller velvet pouch and wrote 2 words on a post-it, for later. Then slid the whole thing back through the mail slot. Outside, the engine roared to life. The SUV idled in the snow, exhaust curling around it like smoke from a failed performance. Eli glanced up at the house one last time. Tiffany didn't. She was too busy texting. Nora didn't wave, didn't scowl, didn't flinch. She just stood there as still and rooted as the oak tree planted by the driveway, the one her husband built the swing on when Eli was 7. The car rolled away without ceremony. 15 minutes later, a cork popped next door. Carol stood on her porch in snow boots and a robe, one hand holding a cheap champagne bottle like it was a trophy. She raised it toward Nora's window and shouted, "Free at last." Nora cracked a smile. Not a grin, not a laugh, just a slow, satisfied stretch of something earned. Back inside, her phone buzzed. "James Petrus." She answered. "It's all filed. Deeds in trust, estates sealed, wills updated. Nobody touches a cent without your say-so," he said. "And the assets I sent last," he chuckled, "hidden in plain sight. Tiffany and Eli never even saw the transfer. Smart move hiding the lake property under the LLC. You're playing chess." They brought Uno cards. She clicked off the call, walked to her closet. For the first time in months, she reached up to the high shelf and pulled down an old canvas duffel. It smelled like cedar and dust and distant memories. She placed it gently on the bed and unzipped it. Inside, carefully folded, was a worn leather-bound journal. The initials "Remove" embossed in the corner. She opened to the first page. Montana, September 1991. First trip without the kids. "We should have done this sooner." Nora let her fingers rest on the ink. She hadn't just secured her home, she'd preserved her freedom. And now she was planning something none of them would see coming. The first strike of the match snapped louder than expected in the silence. Nora cupped it with trembling fingers, guiding it into the old hearth like it was a ritual, one she hadn't performed in decades. The flame caught. Dry birch crackled to life, swallowing the darkness in her in-law suite with slow, deliberate warmth. Nora stepped back, eyes reflecting the flicker. The smell hit her first, that earthy, comforting scent of firewood and old brick, the same scent Richard used to come home with in his flannel coat, cheeks flushed, tracking snow through the kitchen. The fireplace had been dormant since the kids moved out. They'd modernized everything, central heat, ductless units, sleek thermostats, but sleek never stood a chance against silence. She turned from the fire and finished arranging the reading nook. 2 overstuffed armchairs, thrifted and reupholstered by her own hand, faced the flames. Between them a side table with a ceramic mug of chamomile and a book open to chapter 1. The shelves were stacked now, not with her tax manuals or Richard's crossword collection, but with Miles's childhood favorites, Hatchet, The Phantom Tollbooth, Calvin and Hobbes. She'd bought clean copies, one at a time, over the last few weeks. Carol let herself in, balancing a dish towel and a ceramic pan. "Baked apples," she announced. "Didn't even burn them this time, though I was hoping you'd say no so I could eat them myself." Nora took the pan and gestured toward the fireplace. Carol stopped mid-step. "You got it working again." "Didn't take much," Nora said. "Just someone willing to do it." They sat side by side, knees blanketed, apples steaming in small bowls. Outside, snow fell in thick flakes, blanketing the street in slow, quiet forgiveness. Carol watched the flames. "You ever going to miss them?" Nora stirred her apple with a spoon. "They'll miss me first." Her phone buzzed on the windowsill. FaceTime, Miles. She swiped to answer. His freckled face popped up against the backdrop of his new bedroom. Beige walls, a poster already peeling at the edge. "Hey Grandma," he said. "It's super boring here." Nora smiled. "Well, this place is a little louder now. Fireplace is going." "Carol brought dessert that won't survive the night." Carol leaned in. "Tell him I'm not sharing the last one." Miles laughed. "Then can I come visit for winter break? Just me?" Nora felt her chest tighten. Not with hesitation, but with relief. Any time you want, she said. It's your home too. He smiled. But it was quick. Something in his face flickered, like he was holding back something else. I miss how it used to feel, he said softly. Nora didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded. I know, I'm working on making it feel better again. They talked 5 more minutes, then said goodbye with promises of movie nights and hot cocoa that actually used milk. After the call ended, Nora crossed the room to a cardboard box she hadn't opened in years. She knelt and pulled out the dusty camcorder. The battery was long dead, but she had already transferred the tapes last month. Quietly, while organizing her estate documents, she opened her laptop and clicked a file labeled House, 1994. The video started with static, then cleared into an image of a younger Nora holding up 2 wooden planks, while Richard, laughing hammer in hand, built the very railing that now bordered the stairs upstairs. Eli was in the background, no older than 7, stomping through a pile of sawdust. Nora leaned back in her chair and watched. Not for nostalgia, for clarity. That house wasn't theirs. It was built, with sweat, sacrifice, and her own hands. She clicked open her estate trust file, scrolled to the beneficiary field, and began typing. Primary heir, Miles Ellison. The notary seal pressed into the last page with a satisfying click, the embossed paper still warm beneath Nora's hand. Carol glanced up from across the table. That everything? Nora slid the final document into a blue accordion folder already packed with stamped copies and color-coded tabs. Everything from the last 18 months. Income withdrawals, repairs, insurance claims, inheritance statements, all notarized, all traceable. Carol whistled low. If they try to play dumb, they'll choke on the paper trail. Nora nodded. Let them. I've stopped explaining myself to people who weren't listening to begin with. She placed the folder in her fireproof lockbox, then turned to the stack of old paperwork still sitting on the side table, half shredded, brittle with age and trust. Joint accounts, early versions of her will, sticky notes that once said things like "Let Ailey handle this." She looked at Carol. Ready? Carol smiled and fed the first sheet into the shredder with the reverence of a final rite. By the time the machine spat out its last ribbon of paper, Nora's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again, a text. Eli, can we talk? Just start over? One chance. She stared at the message. She didn't blink. She didn't reply. Instead, she took a photo of the newly stamped deed from James, then texted it back with a short note. Forgiveness is emotional. Ownership is legal. She didn't expect a response, and didn't need one. That afternoon, James arrived with a thick envelope in hand. They sat across from each other in her kitchen, the fire still warm behind them. This is the full certification, he said, sliding the document across. House, assets, and trust structure. Your name is undisputed. It would take a federal ruling to reverse anything now. Nora ran her hand over the gold-embossed seal. It wasn't pride she felt. It was peace. They thought soft meant vulnerable, she murmured. They forgot soft things shape stone over time. James raised his coffee mug in salute. Remind me never to get on your bad side, she smirked. Then stopped charging for 2 sugar packets. Later that night, the house was so still that even the clock ticked with dignity. A text lit up her screen. Miles, they're mad. You okay? Nora took a picture of the firelight on her rug and sent it back. Nora, better than ever. She paused, then added, this house breathes better without shouting in it. Miles responded with a single heart emoji. Just before bed, Nora flipped through her mail. Amid utility statements and a catalog of orthopedic shoes she never asked for was a cream envelope with no return address. Inside, a single page, typed, crisp, official tone, subject ethics review filing, involving Mrs. Tiffany Ellison, licensed real estate advisor allegation, undisclosed conflict of interest, involving attempted financial control over elder client resident, filed by anonymous. Nora read it twice, then again. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She folded the letter neatly, and slipped it into a new folder labeled Incoming Consequences. The folder hit the desk with a sound like finality. It wasn't a slam. Nora didn't do drama. But the weight of that leather case landing in front of the community elder advocate said more than shouting ever could. Across from her sat a woman in her 40s, glasses perched halfway down her nose, laptop open and already typing. Her nameplate read, Serena Lopez, Adult Protective Services liaison. Serena raised her eyebrows. You said you had documentation. Most people mean emails. Nora opened the folder slowly. I brought dates, audio, receipts, legal filings, and notarized logs. She paused. I don't do allegations, I do evidence. Serena stopped typing. Over the next hour, Nora laid out the timeline with the precision of a retired city accountant who'd spent her career chasing decimal points and exposing fraud. She played the voice recording. She's basically furniture now, just hang tight till spring. Then she can go. She submitted printed screenshots of Tiffany's social media posts, carefully paired with dates of financial coincidences. She provided power bills showing usage dips during storm weeks, photos of the unplugged heater cord, a timeline of banking alerts, financial overreach with coercive patterns. Serena muttered, typing fast now, power of attorney fraud attempt, utility weaponization, denial of care, neglect. Nora finished for her. Wrapped in Instagram quotes and plausible deniability. Serena looked up. Most people don't come in this prepared. Nora folded her hands. Most people don't know the difference between surviving and proving it. By the end of the meeting, Serena slid a document across the desk. We're filing this under preliminary elder abuse review. Quiet investigation. You'll be contacted for follow-up, but this will move. Nora signed without hesitation. On her way out, Serena added, one more thing, Tiffany Ellison's real estate license is already under ethics review from a separate complaint. If there's overlap, it strengthens the state's case. Nora turned one hand on the doorknob. Overlap, there's a spreadsheet for that in section 3 of the binder. Outside, the air was crisp with the scent of thawing snow and downtown traffic. She walked slowly, letting each breath clear space inside her chest. Later that week, she stood in the back of Miles's school auditorium, surrounded by folding chairs and chatter. He didn't see her at first. His name was called over the mic, Academic Citizenship Award, Miles Ellison. He walked onto stage with shoulders slightly hunched, eyes down. But then he caught her gaze. Front row, arms crossed, small proud smile. He lit up. After the ceremony, he ran to her without asking, without overthinking. She pulled him into a hug, tighter than usual. You didn't have to come, he said into her scarf. You earned it, she replied. Showing up is part of the reward. She didn't mention his parents. Neither did he. Back home that evening, Carol was already waiting on the porch with a pie and gossip. You remember that ethics complaint? Carol said as they settled into the living room. Word is, Tiffany's brokerage firm got wind of it and pulled her listings from the winter catalog. Not fired, but frozen. Nora snorted. Appropriate. Her new bio just says on leave. They wanted my silence. Nora said, sipping her cider. I gave them my records. Just as she was about to settle in for the night, her email pinged with a subject line that made her blink. Invitation. Financial Literacy Panel, Vertical Bar Buffalo Women's Guild. She opened it. Miss Ellison, we would be honored if you'd speak at our March panel on financial boundaries and elder empowerment. She leaned back in her chair. The firelight flickered across the polished edge of her trust documents, from invisible to invited. The ground didn't just thaw, it bloomed. Nora stood at the edge of her backyard, garden gloves in one hand, pruning shears in the other, staring at the peony bulbs breaking through the dark earth. It was the same bed Richard had dug 2 decades ago, the same soil she'd nearly let go to rot after his passing. But now it was hers again. Warm sun spilled over her shoulders. The air smelled like wet mulch, tulip stems and wind. Each breath tasted like permission. She knelt slowly, placing the first sprout stake in the ground, then another. She wasn't just reviving the garden, She was redrawing the map. From behind her came the soft click of the newly installed security camera rotating at the edge of the house. Carol had helped her with the installation. 2 at the back, 1 at the front, and 1 discreetly angled toward the side entry. The new locks had gone in the week before. Double deadbolts, smart access code for guests only. The old house groaned in protest at first, but eventually adjusted. She wasn't locking people out. She was keeping her peace in. The mail came at noon. She walked out to the box, garden gloves tucked in her waistband, expecting the usual mix of bank statements and local grocery ads, but there it was. Thick envelope. No return address. Her name handwritten on the front. Inside, Nora. We've had time to think. A lot of it. We weren't perfect. We know that. Maybe we didn't handle things well. Maybe we didn't understand the pressure you were under. But you're still family. Can we talk? Eli and Tiffany, no apology. No mention of what they'd done. Just can we talk, dressed up as Olive Branch Theater. Nora stepped inside, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled open the drawer where she'd stored the original heater plug, the one Tiffany had yanked from the outlet that January night. The frayed cord still curled like a snake. She placed it next to the envelope, then walked over to her filing cabinet and pulled out a manila envelope with a single photograph. The snowed-in back door. The day after the blizzard. A fresh boot print leading away. Nora standing inside, holding the plug in her hand. She wrote nothing, said nothing, just slid the photo into an envelope and mailed it back. No note. No explanation. Let them stare at what they chose to forget. Later that week, James called with a pleasant tone. Just wrapped the final form. You're officially filed for senior homeowner exemption. And with the garden certification from the city's clean lot registry, your taxes are dropping again next cycle. Nora smiled. I'll use the savings for bulbs. Maybe a few fruit trees. Don't plant anything that won't outlive them, he joked. Oh, I intend to. That weekend, the front gate creaked open, but not with tension. Miles stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, holding a paper bag. Got you the lemon tea you like, he said shyly. Also, can I help with the garden this year? Nora stepped aside, smiling. Only if you know how to argue with squirrels. He dropped his bag, rolled up his sleeves, and knelt beside her in the dirt. Together they planted marigolds, basil, a patch of mint, he said, smelled like summer gum. Hours later, as the sun lowered into amber streaks across the backyard, Nora placed a single flat stone at the edge of the garden wall. She carved into it slowly with her old metal etching tool, pressing the words with care. Let warmth be earned. She wiped the dirt from her gloves and stared at the stone. Not with anger, not even triumph, just truth. The smell hit first. Rosemary, garlic, and slow braised beef thick in the air, clinging to the walls like an old familiar song. Nora stood by the stove, lifting the lid off the Dutch oven. Steam curled upward, warm and fragrant. The pot roast was nearly finished, tender, rich, and humming with quiet pride. In the living room, Miles and Carol laughed over the final touches on the table. They'd strung soft white lights around the window frame, lined the sill with fresh herbs from the garden, and folded the napkins into little peaks. It wasn't elegant. It was earned. Outside, dusk draped the neighborhood in a soft blue hush. Porch lights flicked on. Screen doors creaked open. One by one, neighbors made their way toward the Ellison house, not with pity, not with obligation, but with warm bread baskets and wine bottles under their arms. The same neighbors who once waved politely, but kept their distance, now stepped onto the porch like it was home. Inside, Nora lit the last taper candle, then turned to the door. A new wooden sign hung beside it, carved and sanded by Miles himself. Only the welcomed. Carol leaned against the doorway, hands flour-dusted, apron streaked with cider glaze. This, she said, nodding toward the chatter and clinking inside, feels like an exorcism and a potluck rolled into one. Nora poured cider into mismatched mugs. One's for the soul, one's for the belly. Carol sipped, You ever going to let them back in? The question didn't come with judgment, just curiosity, like checking if a wound still stung. Nora looked at the sign, then back at Carol. If warmth was conditional for me, it is for them too. The front door opened, laughter spilling out like honey. Dishes passed hand to hand. A child offered Nora a drawing she'd made of the garden. Someone played quiet piano from the phone on a speaker. Nora sat at the head of the table. Her table. No Tiffany, hovering to control seating. No Eli shrinking into silence. Just friends. People who knew the value of showing up. She raised her glass. To quiet exits, she said, locking eyes with Carol. And louder returns. Carol lifted hers in return. With better seasoning. Mid-meal, Nora stood, walked to the small wooden secretary in the hallway, and opened the drawer where she kept her latest legal updates. She pulled out a single document and walked it over to Carol. Power of attorney. Just in case, Nora said, sliding it across the table. You're next in line. No surprises, no shortcuts. Carol stared at it, then back at her. You sure about this? I trust you, Nora replied. And I've learned that's a currency worth hoarding. Carol signed it without further comment. As the night wound down, Miles curled up on the reading chair near the fireplace, a plate of apple pie in one hand, the dog-eared copy of Hatchet in the other. He looked up and grinned. This, he said, is what it was supposed to feel like, right? Nora knelt beside him and brushed his hair back. This is what we build when no one gets to steal the heat again. Just as the last guest said goodbye and Carol began collecting mugs, the doorbell rang. No one had expected more visitors. On the porch sat a plain envelope. No return address. Nora picked it up, slid it open with the butter knife still in her hand. Inside, IRS notice of audit taxpayer. Tiffany L. Ellison subject, real estate income irregularities, pending investigation. She didn't say a word. She just turned to Carol and held up the envelope, like it was dessert. The tea was steeped long enough to tint the cup a deep amber. Nora didn't rush it. She never did now. The fire crackled beside her in its brick frame, and every flicker cast shadows that felt more like company than ghosts. She sat in her favorite chair, the old green one Richard used to claim before breakfast. A wool throw was draped across her knees, and the ceramic mug warmed both hands. Outside, the last remnants of frost clung to the edges of the window pane. But inside was climate-controlled clarity. The heater hummed in the background, low and steady like a well-fed cat. No surges, no silence, no sudden cutoffs. Just uninterrupted warmth, engineered to serve only her space, installed with her own money, wired by Carol, and powered by a utility bill in her name alone. Nora took another sip and closed the last page of her late husband's travel journal. She didn't cry. Not now. She had already lived through every word twice, once in memory, and once again in ink. She set the journal down on the cedar side table, stood and walked slowly through the house. Every room had been touched, not by money, but by intention. In the front hallway, Miles's painting hung above the bench. A watercolor of her garden, wild and imperfect. It was crooked and she never fixed it. In the kitchen, the apron she and Carol shared was still looped around a hook, dusted with flour from the last pie. The in-law suite, once a dungeon of cold tile and neglect, now glowed with refurbished lamps, quilted curtains and bookshelves filled with joy instead of necessity. In the hallway, she passed the thermostat. She paused. Smiling, she placed one finger against the dial. The soft beep and orange glow confirmed what she already knew. Her home had stayed warm for months, without interruption, without intrusion. It was hers again. Every inch. There were no doorbells ringing at odd hours, no passive-aggressive notes, no frozen silence behind her back. Just space and peace. The mailbox creaked as she opened it that afternoon. Tucked inside the usual stack was a smaller envelope, no return address but hand-addressed in clean blue ink. She opened it on the porch. Dear Mrs. Ellison, your donation helped us purchase thermal blankets and emergency kits for 23 residents this winter. You didn't just keep yourself warm, you helped strangers find safety in the cold. Thank you for remembering us when others forgot. Willow Park Elder Shelter Nora folded the note carefully and brought it inside. She placed it beside her trust documents, her deed and the copy of her talk from the Women's Financial Literacy Panel. She whispered to the quiet house, "I paid it forward." They never did. Later that evening, she opened her own leather-bound journal. Not Richard's this time. Hers. On the final page, in ink that didn't shake, she wrote, "Never confuse quiet for powerless." She paused, then drew a single underline. As she stood and walked to the fireplace, she looked once more around her home. A home once shared, now sacred. Not out of bitterness, not vengeance, but earned. She tossed one last log onto the flames and whispered the truth aloud. Not for anyone else, just for herself. They left me cold, so I let them feel the chill of being written out.